Hello, friends. I'm super excited to be here with Kelly Sledd today, who's going to talk about bioenergetics. I had the opportunity to actually have a session with her a little bit ago. I think it was like a month or so ago. So I'm excited to kind of share a little bit about my personal experience because sometimes it's hard to put words to such beautiful work. So before we get started, I'm going to have Darcy Mihan read her bio. Darcy?
Hello, all. I am so glad to be part of this conversation uh, and grateful to introduce Kelly. Kelly Sledd is a bioenergetics practitioner who helps clients understand the language of their own bodies and reconnect to the wisdom of their God given design. She facilitates a healing process that supports the nervous system and restores energetic flow while honoring that true transformation comes through the client's own intention, surrender, and alignment with truth. With intuition and subtle energy awareness, Kelly creates a space where clients can attune to the signals of their body and move toward greater clarity and freedom. I already have so many questions, and I'm going to hand it back to you, Michelle, for the conversation, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, welcome, Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you both.
Yay. Um, well, I thought, why don't we get started with why you got started in this work to begin with?
Yeah, I've been doing it for a lot of years. Or I've been on the receiving end, I should say, for a lot of years. So I had graduated. So I went to college and I studied art. And then I ended up in a seminary program for 2 years where my degree was in spiritual direction and biblical counseling. And then when that was done, I moved to Kansas City and I was working at a coffee shop by day and teaching art classes in the afternoon and loved all things inner healing. And I had a friend that called me and said, "Hey, I know this woman that teaches a process paint course. I think you should reach out to her because that would be perfect for you. It's kind of like this synthesis of all the things that you love. Maybe you could take it, maybe you could teach it with her." And so that's how I reached out to a gal in town named Marcy Myers. And so she's been a huge part of my journey. And that's where I called her to inquire about process paint. And she didn't have any of those workshops coming up, but she said, "Do you want to make an appointment?" And so I did. I made an appointment having no idea what I was stepping into. I had never even heard of it. And you have to remember this was 15 years ago. So it's like it's more commonplace. Like people have more of a grid for energy work these days. But back then I didn't know a soul who was doing energy work. So anyway, I went to the session and I went to multiple sessions and I kept feeling called back, even though I did not have a clue what she was doing. Like I did not understand. And if anything, I even had a little bit of fear that maybe it wasn't something that I should be doing. Like I thought, is this something occultic? Is this something that she's tapping into that I that's kind of off limits? And so I just know that I kept feeling called to it. And so I was talking to my seminary professors and I was expressing this and they said, "Well, what exactly is she doing in a session?" And I described it and my one of my professors said, "Well, it sounds like your body's telling on you." And that was sort of the thing that I didn't know what was happening, but I felt like my body was telling on me. And I felt like that was sort of this perfect summary of what was going on. And it also gave me permission to keep going. And so I think back, I mean, I was in my early to mid 20s when I was going to these sessions with her. And I mean, I feel like I would have been a difficult client for me today because I remember just showing up and being as stiff as a board, just so rigid, so tight, so much tension in my body, and just not even understanding the why of it, but also recognizing that it was doing something for me. I was noticing less tension, more awareness. I had coined this term when I was, like I said, I worked coffee shop by morning, art classes by afternoon. I had coined the term energetic boundaries. And I don't think I had ever even read that anywhere, but I had this sense that I needed some sort of boundary in the invisible world, like I knew what actual boundaries were. I had read the books on boundaries and how to implement them, but I hadn't actually, I didn't know. I still felt like with interacting with people, the lines were getting blurred. Like, where do I end and where do they begin? And this is my sensitivity, but it's also when you don't really know how to manage it, it can feel kind of overwhelming. And so that's sort of what I feel like she was really helpful with, is just sort of clarifying um, my bubble, what's mine and what's not mine. And that's where we also worked through so many things over the years. Because like I said, I received for so many years, looking at my own trauma and looking at my own story and unconscious stuff, unconscious patterns in my body. Um, and the entire process was just really healing for me. And the way I ended up describing it, kind of when I had been in it for a while, was just that I came in to bioenergetics with a lot of truth in my mind. I did have a lot of truth in my mind. I had worked through a lot of my story in my seminary program, but there's a big difference between having truth in your mind and having truth in your body. I could tell myself all day long I'm not nervous. And yet if my body's giving me those signals, I'm not having this embodied experience of relaxation, no matter what it is that I'm saying out loud. And so that's where I just had a lot of transformation with her. And, it was on the table in one of my sessions with her that I actually knew that I was going to do this work. And then it was just sort of a matter of kind of getting the training and actually having it be the right time for me to move forward with it. So,
Oh my gosh. Is she local?
she's local. Yes, she's local. She's in the Overland Park area. She's written a book called Blessed with Energy. And so that's kind of a good starting point. I feel like I direct people to that sometimes if they don't have a clue about energy work. Um, and she just has been, I mean, she was around for my first serious relationships and my first breakup. So we've known each other a long time, and and it was just really transformative. So she was my introduction. Since then, I've had multiple other teachers. Every bioenergetics or energy teacher kind of offers a different flavor, different background. I wouldn't say that there's one set. This is what bioenergetics always looks like. I'm friends with other practitioners in town, and everybody has a little bit different of approach. Um, my background in seminary and learning to listen to people's stories has kind of equipped me to, I'm not afraid of the talking part. Sometimes people get overwhelmed with, I don't know what to say. And it's not talk therapy. But that's where it doesn't put me on tilt to hear people's stories because of my background, where some people really are like, the story doesn't matter. Let's move forward with the body work. So there's all sorts of different ways that it plays out, and everybody's different. And um, but I was definitely influenced through Marcy.
You said something about keeping in your bubble,
Yeah.
like differentiating between your energy and the other person's, because that's obviously a huge piece that you'd want to master
Oh,
before
yeah.
into this. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. I read this book. This was kind of when I was doing all sorts of work on reparenting my inner child. Um, it was like an interesting thought at the time to think that we are every age we've ever been. And I remember reading books that in fact, what was it even called? It was something about the intuitive child. I had picked up this book hoping to gain some awareness about my own sensitivity as a kid, because I was the kid I was sick a lot. As I got older, like as I got to middle school, when anxiety was kind of high. And this is where I think, man, I didn't really have any of those tools to deal with my sensitivity. And so I read this one book, and I'm spacing on the exact title of it, but that's where one of the things that is suggested in this book, if you have a sensitive child, is having them determine, ask the question, is this mine or is this theirs? And I remember when I read that, I thought, huh? Like, how does that work? But I remember being at the coffee shop and leaving and feeling so fatigued after just a morning shift, having interacted with so many people. And I did it. I asked the question, is this mine? And I got a no. It was like, no, this is not mine. And I felt this immediate sense of relief. And so that's kind of when it got more real for me, that not all the things that I was experiencing were even mine. And that's something that a lot of sensitive people get plagued with. It's how to convert all the things that you're picking up on, how to hold kind of an anchor point and hold the line for yourself, that you're not getting tossed about by everybody around you. So that's what the work does. That's where it equips you to be more sturdy kind of in your own system, so you're not just tossed about with the waves.
And it's actually really helpful for like all different types of healers, work to be able to know how to differentiate um and protect.
Definitely. And we're always getting signals, like this is where I referenced in my bio the language. And doing bioenergetics is you've got to know your own body's language, but this is where you're also helping others interpret their own bodies. How does information come in for you? How do you perceive it? And so, for me, like one of the things that I know, if I've got a client that comes in that's very ungrounded, that has lots of disembodied talking, this
Mhm.
is where I get a particular sensation in my head. And it's almost like, okay, this is my body's indicator. This is my language that I've had to learn, that it's time for me to really ground so I don't float off with them. And this is where everybody gets information differently. So for the other practitioners that I know, sometimes the way they get their information about clients, like what's happening, is they get it in their own body. I have some of that. I also get a lot of information in my hands.
Mhm.
Um, I have another practitioner friend who sees a lot of really detailed scenes. She gets images. And then similarly, clients on the table have their own ways of kind of interpreting sensation. So that's where a client, so for example, feeling grounded. For some people, feeling grounded, it might feel like your legs are like weights, heavy lead weights. Whereas for other people, it might feel light and airy. Or I've got one friend who, whenever she's in a really relaxed, grounded state, she always says she feels like the Michelin Man. And so this is where I think it's helpful to even name those sensations. So then when you're by yourself, you get to recognize, oh, I lifted off. I lost some of my grounding, or, oh, I'm coming back in, So that's the language part of it. You've got to kind of learn how you're wired so you can help get yourself there. Because the goal is not to go to a practitioner for the rest of your life. It's like the goal is to learn how to do this for yourself, so you're able to kind of ground yourself, check in with yourself, know what's kind of going on in your own system.
Yeah, you were mentioning, I was pulling up the different types of like clairvoyances, like, hearing, feeling, sensing, all of.
Smelling. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Mhm.
and it's also interesting too, because the more I do this work, the more my senses expand. It's the higher sense perception. And it's kind of like when if somebody has sight and then they lose their sight, all the senses that come in to compensate. And so if you're spending time doing energy work, this is where your ability to perceive things expands. I actually made a list of notes on my phone of how information started coming in, like when it was new. So I've got my list of 1 to 25 of this is when I could start feeling the direction of my own chakra spinning on the front side, but I couldn't get it on the back side. Or then this is where I could feel the energy centers on the back side. And I remember there was a point in time where the idea of sensing your field, it was like, it was one thing to sense your own arm, but how do you sense your field? How do you sense the bubble around you? That felt like an impossibility. But that's something that the more you do the work, it just expands to where you're able to kind of access that information.
Mhm. Mhm. I love it. I love it. And I'd love to hear about, a lot of people ask me, what would they expect from a session? Like, what do they need to be prepared for? Are there certain types of ailments that you work better with, you know, in terms
Yeah.
of tuning?
So often I get a lot of people that have the mystery ailments. And a lot of times that's because they've tried all the other things and nothing's touching it. And it makes sense to me just because most issues I found just when I do innate testing on them, it's rare that they're actually just purely physical. It's like most things have an emotional or a spiritual root, or, or spiritual and mental, or any combination of all of those. And so that's where the roots, people look for physical, they go for physical healing, thinking that there's physiological issues, when very often it's emotional roots, emotional history that's kind of at play. So that's where I get a lot of people with the mystery ailments. Sensitive people go right along with that, just like my sixth grade self, who was having, all sorts of stomach issues. That was anxiety playing out in my body. So sensitive people tend to have more of those. Um, but as for what a session looks like, it's different based on who's showing up and the state that they're showing up. For some people, this kind of goes back to defense structures. So that's something that sets bioenergetics apart from other healing modalities, is that there's some categories for thinking about how you're defended. What do you do with the energy when you don't feel safe? So, for example, some people might throw their energy when they don't feel safe. Other people might accumulate and hold on to energy and not know how to let it go. Um, for another type, they might have never felt safe in the body, and so they leave their body. And so these are some general categories that kind of help with what people are dealing with when they come in. So for a person that has been leaving their body, sometimes from in utero, if mom didn't feel safe in the world, then baby doesn't feel safe in the world. And so that's where, if you've got a person on the table who has um, not ever really felt safe in the world and has had to leave their body, that's where your session is just going to be just getting comfortable with even being in the body. Like that is a huge feat for some, just to even be in the body at all. um, but it kind of depends on who's showing up. What I'll say though is just that nervous system work is the basis of all of it. So everything always begins with the nervous system. And you don't move forward unless the nervous system is in a regulated state. It doesn't mean that you don't ever have a strong feeling come up or a stress response, but the idea is that you're doing it with another person and that you're safe enough that you can kind of go there. So I kind of think about it as establishing a home base. It's like a lot of people come in and they don't have a home base within their own body. They want to leave their bodies. And so that's where it's all about just really relaxing the system so they're safe enough to even go there.
Yeah, when I went into session with you, I kind of came in open. I did have some, I'm always dealing with perimenopausal symptoms. Um, so like staying connected to my body and this new relationship that's happening with aging and all the things. But what I think was so interesting, because I was available and grounded, um, I guess what I'll share with the audience is that you're able to pick up things like there was a disconnection from my past that you were able to pick up on, that we were able to kind of communicate about without necessarily going into a therapy session about it.
Yeah,
We didn't need words, you were able to kind of uh, feel through the energy. And I think that is like that's true energy healing, right? Is because oftentimes we'll forget, or we get things that are stuck that we never fully processed all the way through.
for sure. And it always shows up in the body. That's why body work, this kind of work, is so amazing, because there's no our minds can't take it over. This is where a lot of people show up, and it's kind of like people can end up being talking heads. It's like they can have therapy terminology and they can understand their story, and yet there's a real disconnect from the actual body. And with this type of work, you can't talk your way through it. It's like, first off, the injury didn't happen lots of times when we were even in our thinking brains, when it didn't happen cognitively. And so that's where it can't be processed cognitively. It's got to be processed on the physical level, that it's actually showing up. And it's always crazy to me the way that the body is really just a roadmap. I had I mean, it's like I have so many stories that just echo what you just said. Like I had a client that showed up that was having issues within her community and what was, not feeling supported, and what was reflected in her body was that her energy was cut off at her knees. She had no energy past her knees. So when you even think about that, what is it to be cut off at the knees? It's like, okay, you're not getting the support. And it's wild just how clear it can be reflected in what's actually kind of showing up in the body or showing up in your organs. It's organs, it's fascia, nervous system, it's kind of every system under the sun. It's kind of can play out in different ways.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what's also interesting is what I'm hearing you say is you do a lot of resourcing and grounding work. There's a lot of other modalities like EMDR in the clinical world, and oftentimes they'll just kind of stay with the grounding resourcing work for a while, right? When someone's just not in their body or so dysregulated and so kind of all over the place, just kind of having the space with the modality that you're using to just ground.
Yes, it's often needed. This is where the other thing too is that when you have the support of a practitioner, this is where you're able to do some work that you might not be able to do by yourself. So with the feeling center, that's your second energy center. A lot of people are kind of blocked there. This is it comes back. I mean, there's not like a here's the one thing that it is. If you've got this issue, this is what it is. But in general, that area, things that can play out can be related to sensuality, creativity, feeling your feelings. And there's so many people that aren't feeling their feelings. We talk about our feelings, we think about our feelings, but in terms of actually feeling them, we're not doing that. And so the way I end up experiencing that area is it ends up being incredibly low flow. It can end up even being, I can perceive it as being cold to the touch, where it's not even just neutral, but it's actually pushing away energy. Um, and it ends up having health consequences in the long run. It's like we are different energetically every day, but there's also sort of a baseline that gets established. And so that's where when people are coming in multiple times, that's where I can kind of start putting together a picture of, oh, these parts change, but this is kind of where we're locked in these certain areas. So um, and like I said, there's consequence, there's health consequence from the energetic blocks. It's not just like um, the energy being blocked is what feeds your organs. It's what creates health in those areas. And if it's been a really, really long time without flow in an area, there's a consequence to that. So I worked on a gal who had been working on trying to get pregnant for so long and just had trouble with it. And then this is where she came to me actually the week um, before she did an egg transfer for IVF. And it was interesting because when I did the body scan on her, there was no flow to her womb. There was no flow there. And so this is where part of my job is figuring out, okay, what's the belief that's actually creating this block here? What's the belief or memory? What's actually being held here? And so I had tried a few different ways to get that area to unlock because I knew it needed flow. And that's where what ended up happening, nothing I was doing was working, but she ended up just saying, I'm so mad at God. I'm so mad at God that I could do all the right things and still be having to go through this process. And I'm not kidding you. The second she said that, her it came back online. Her womb came back online with the warmth. And so this is the importance of feeling your feelings. It's like this is where we don't get to skip. We don't get to skip the hard part. It's like we have to kind of go through it in order to have a different experience. And then after we did that work, um, that's where she ended up having a successful transfer and has a little girl that's here today. And I'm not saying that's because of me, but that's where it's, of course, going to be beneficial to have flow actually going to all of your organs and to have processed the feeling that's being held there.
Would you be able to help somebody like post surgery in healing?
Absolutely. And in fact, this is where what's wild. I mean, this stuff blows even my mind. I think I would feel more skeptical if I weren't the one doing it. But this is where I can even help people during surgery. So that's where you can set up sessions to do remote work, where you check in. Where this is where I would check in with them before the surgery, during the surgery, right when they come out, and then you could do another even post session after that, just to kind of make sure everything's um, going okay with that. So it's kind of like sky's the limit, which, like I said, the remote work always sort of blows my mind, just that it's even possible. But as I mentioned, the primary way I get information is through my hands. And I remember when I was in school, this is where we did our first remote session, and I had I didn't know what to expect. But that's where I remember I had the remote session and I had my table set up, and I went through my process the way I normally would do with a person around the table. And I had all the same information that came through. And so I don't know, it's not, it doesn't blow my mind now, but there's a lot of people that will ask me, it's like, how does that work? How do you do it? And this is where it's all the quantum stuff that I couldn't actually explain to you. The way I think about it is just that God is in and through and holds all things together. And there's access that is maybe not what people think is possible, but it is with consent. That's the key. You've got to have consent before you're trying to tap into people's fields and access them remotely. So that's a key. That's a key part of it.
So then, like, helping people heal from more like serious diseases could be a piece.
Absolutely. Yeah, and very frequently, because a lot of the injuries and sickness that people deal with are from chronic energetic issues. So this is where if you are ungrounded and not having energy in the lower half of your body, this is where you're probably more likely to have the ankle injuries, knee injuries, pelvic injuries. Um, it's just like it's all connected. So it's very unique to whatever, um, that's where whatever each person has going on. It's like that's where you have to just kind of look at it together. But it definitely our injuries don't just come upon us. It's like they're very much related to what we're carrying.
Um, Darcy, I'm going to pause for a second. Do you have any questions yet?
I absolutely do. This is fascinating. Fascinating. So, one main question that I have is if someone is really clear that there's a disconnect between parts of their body or how they want to be, how they want to feel, and how they currently feel. So, maybe current and future self. They're not specifically, they don't have a specific question or um, problem or issue that they want to point to. Would connecting with you and bioenergetics be able to benefit them if they don't have words for what they're really wanting to solve, like
Oh,
they don't have a problem to
absolutely.
solve?
And in fact, that's kind of where bioenergetics shine. I have mostly female clients, but this is where I feel like the work is really suited for a lot of men. And I want more men to be calling me for services because it's the talking about it is not always required. I feel like that's the reason why a lot of men stay out of therapy is because they don't actually want to talk about it. And so that's the plus side of with bioenergetics. I mean, there's ways there's sometimes where no talking is needed at all, and then there's ways that sometimes I would have to direct somebody to something, but it's not going to be as talk heavy as you know talk therapy or other modalities like that. But a person could absolutely benefit from it because the primary work is connecting the nervous system, and so this is where that's always my step one. And people show up as parts and pieces. They really do. It's like the upper half's not talking to the lower half, the left's not talking to the right. People have their own patterns that show up in their bodies. And sometimes it's specific areas. It's like maybe you've got pretty good energetic flow everywhere except there's a certain area that's cut off. And so that's where opening up nerve flow that's the thing that creates the sense of well-being, and that's what creates the coherence too.
Mm,
So it's like we're all made to be our whole selves. And so this is where that's when I talk about people being the walking heads, the talking heads, it's like that's not how you were actually created to be. You're not supposed to be in the intellectual at all times. It's like it's a tool, but you're not supposed to live there. And so this is where it's all about integration. Bioenergetics helps integrate these things so you're one whole person.
mm.
That's hopefully, and you feel it physically. Does that make
And
sense?
completely. And I'm wondering how bioenergetics differs from, and your approach specifically, how it differs from, and how it may be similar to Reiki or something like rapid eye therapy, deep breathing.
Sure. There can be breath work in bioenergetics. It's not EMDR, but this is where we are tapping into the bilateral movement. That's the two hemispheres. That's what makes the EMDR so healing. So that can be a part of sessions. Um, in terms of Reiki, this is something I wouldn't want to pretend that I'm an authority on this because it's not like I'm not a Reiki expert, but from the people that I've talked to, my impression is that the way that bioenergetics is different than Reiki has a more of a bent towards the energy will go where it needs to go. Bioenergetics is a little bit more directive, where it's not so much trusting it'll go where it needs to go. It's finding where it needs to go and talking through how to get it there, which very often there's not energetic flow to an area because of a belief. It's like there can be a lie that we hold in our system, and until that is released and until you bring in the truth, that that energy flow is not going to go there, if that makes sense. This is part of the body questioning that happens with people when they come in. Other differences would be Reiki is using symbols, from what I understand, to amplify energy. This is my impression
Mm,
from what been told. There's nothing like that in bioenergetics. It's really more just about the body systems. It's what's showing up in the fascia, what's showing up in the organs, what is the breathing pattern, what's the muscle tension pattern. It's all very much just the physical things that you're looking at kind of in the system.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
There's something really intriguing about your approach that also has this mystery element. Even though you're describing it very clearly, there's something I was like, I can't quite pinpoint why it feels so important. And it does. And that may be in part due to how profound and wise the body is. And I know for myself, learning how to communicate with my body and respect what I'm hearing, even when I don't fully understand it, and honor it is such a learning curve. And I
For
know that's true for a lot of people who have more and less regulated nervous systems. And like we were talking earlier, living in a city
yeah.
and being aware of some of what's going on in the country, let alone just in myself, um, has me in more fight or flight. So I could see myself really benefiting from this regularly.
Yeah, it's good. And that's where I think it's good too for people to kind of limit the input. I mean, I think, again, this is where there's so much input in our world that it doesn't really matter how regulated your nervous system is or how much work you've done. There's an element of sometimes it's just too much. And so this is where I'm kind of strict about what I take in. It's like I'm strict about um, what I watch and what I read and kind of what ideas that I'm putting in and kind of what I'm taking in, just because even though my nervous system is so much more regulated than it used to be, you can still be put on tilt with just all the excess. Um, that said, with the nervous system, I think the lie is that I'll be relaxed once this stressful thing gets over with. Once I get through this, then I'll relax. And what I've found is just really that it's truly that you grow your capacity to hold more. That's the thing that I've seen for myself. Not that life got less stressful, but just that I got more tools and was able to um, process more of what was kind of coming in. So I had a dream once. I early on when I was in bioenergetics, and I get dreams. I remember about something about my dreams almost every night, and then I get dreams multiple times a year that I feel like when I wake up, I know that they're for me. And so this was, 10 plus years ago. I was doing a lot of work with Marcy, and I had this dream, and it was this. It was kind of like a sewer with water flowing through it with this huge grate, and there were pieces of trash that had gotten mashed up against the grate that were keeping water from flowing through it. And I remember when I woke up, I knew exactly what that was. And it was, I had this awareness that the work I was doing was removing the clutter and removing the trash so things could flow through. Very often when we get stuck, it's an old loop. It's like it's something that has history that needs to be cleared. And the more we clear those triggers and we clear unconscious stuff and we clear the trauma held in our body, it's more like a free flow where I'm not getting hung up on stuff. Again, it's like if you look into the data on actually feeling your feelings, it's something like it lasts like 90 seconds. It's something really short to actually feel a feeling. And so that's where I think that that's um, what this work does. It's kind of like it's clearing so it's clearing the scene so the feeling can come and go, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and not just get stuck in the loop.
Thing about the body, it's like there we're not walking circles or spirals. We're, cylinders. Like we stand upright or horizontal. So we've got lines to move through. I think of like a tunnel versus a bowl that things can circle. So what you're saying about the energy, it's like it moving the support to move things through instead of clench and hold on is imperative. So I'm so grateful you're doing what you're doing, and I want to come visit and be able to see you in
Yeah,
person.
please do. Yeah, it's really fascinating. I think you can tell sometimes when a story has history, just even when a person says, if you find yourself saying, "Oh, this again," that's an indicator that there's some history and that there's some looping going on and something that needs to be cleared. Just because, or if something happens and there's a huge charge related to it, where it's like something that happens and then it feels devastating. It's like that's kind of an indicator that there's some history or belief that's playing out in your body that's highlighted by that event.
So I want to go back to the virtual because our audience is national. So we're having people listen in from all over. You are located in Parkville, Missouri.
Yes.
Um, for the people that are out of state, can you speak to the virtual work? Is that something that you're open to?
I am. Yeah. In primarily right now, I like in-person work. I think it can be really good just to have some in-person sessions under your belt just to kind of lay the groundwork for what a session looks like. So that's ideal. To at least have one or two of those under your belt, but it's also not required. And I do work on people remotely. I'm still sort of in the process of figuring out how that works best. And I probably just need to be doing it more to be clear on that. But there is, like I said, there's the same information that's available. I like the idea of doing sessions kind of live with people because it's the back and forth questioning that can actually provide a lot of shifts. Because it's like I can do things from remotely that are like checking in on your system. Like I can check your organs and I can check your energy centers and I can do all of that. And yet the actual work that I think is the most transformative is some of the body questioning where you're talking through what's being held here and do you want to keep it or do you want to let it go?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So So for people that want to find you, what's the best way to connect with you?
Probably my website, embodywellnesskc.com. I've got my phone number on there. So that's where people, and as well as my email, so people can call or email. That's also, you're able to book a session there, which if you're in town, that's sometimes the best way to go, just so you can see for yourself how your experience is. Because like I said, this is where words can fall short. It's like, how do you describe this work? The other thing too is that every session is different. It really depends on what's showing up in the body. So you just kind of have to see how people are when they show up.
Um, how many sessions do people typically have with you?
It totally depends. I have those occasional people they come in and they're one-offs where it's like the work probably feels a little threatening to their system. But this is where I've got clients that come, every month, every few weeks. When I started, I had more urgent issues in my life. And so that's where I used to go at least once a month. But then as I worked through more of my things and had less urgency, that's where it spread out more. So I still receive sessions from different practitioners, but it wouldn't be that frequently. It's more based on need that's coming up.
Okay.
So different for everybody. There's no one answer.
Do you ever do groups?
I would like to get into groups. I haven't done groups yet. This is where I've also thought about what it would be like to get into married couples too, because when we talk about defense structures, it's how what you're doing with energy intersects with how somebody else is, what they're doing with their energy, and it's all about how people are staying safe. And so this is where if couples can get really clear on what they do when they feel threatened, that awareness can help you make shifts. So, one of the things that can happen is when one of the defense structures, and it's not as if you're one of them, you can be multiple in different areas. But in my marriage, this is where something that can come out when I'm angry is I can want to energetically throw my energy, which is where that is where your backside is your will, your front side is your feelings. This is where the person would, in their defense, in the attempt to feel safe, they would shut off the front part of their body, open up their will centers, and fling their energy at whoever they're dealing with. And so I am aware I don't really have that inclination in life except with my husband. But I was able to, in a moment with him, sit down and check in with my own body and become aware of the fact that I couldn't even feel my front side. And so that became the work right then in that moment for me is okay, I'm going to try to access my feeling centers here. I'm all up in my will, all up in my backside, ready to throw energy to feel safe. But I need to get back to kind of sensing my front side and not do that because it's unproductive. So this is where if a person knows what defense structure they're coming to the table with, it's easier to kind of make shifts around that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the idea of working with the coupleship sounds really interesting, but like starting with one person at a time and then bringing the coupleship in sounds
That's
pretty.
ideal. Yeah, because it's kind of a heavy lift just doing one person at a time. The things that come up for people with just their own sessions, it's like I did my own sessions for years before I even thought about how that intersected with other people.
Right. Yeah, you have to like start with your own ability to understand yourself and
Yeah.
impact everybody. I love it. I love this work. I love this work in adjunct with other work. Like, I mean, this is just such a beautiful missing piece for sure.
Yeah, it does. I love it too. It's been so good for me personally. I love seeing how it benefits clients and it pairs nicely with a lot of other things too. Because even for talk therapists, if they get to a place where they're feeling stuck, like things aren't moving, this is where adding in a bioenergetic session can kind of unlock the next layer. Or I've got a lot of clients who do parts work and they meet with their parts work therapist, and that's where, or the interfamily systems, and that's where there's always overlap in sessions where they're able to make different connections, like, oh, that's showing up here as well.
Well, and we work with a lot of folks with eating disorders, so like being able to get into body and connect and
Oh yeah. I mean, all of these things really do come back to the nervous system. It's like why are people having eating disorders? Why are people drinking in excess? Why are people fill in the blank? It's like it really comes back to how we're trying to regulate ourselves. And so this is where if you're able to um, have a regulated nervous system, the need for some of those things can fall away, or the coping strategy can kind of fall away.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're gonna, your info will be obviously below to find you for virtual or in person, and maybe even some coupleship work for some of those couples
Yeah,
out.
I would like to work with children more. That's something that's on my list because I think, boy, if I had had help when I was young to kind of know how to use my sensitivity, that would have been helpful. But again, it's sort of figuring out how all of that looks. So
Yeah, oh my gosh, absolutely. Appreciating and connecting with that part of ourselves. Yeah, not waiting till all this time.
for
So
sure.
amazing. Well, thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Darcy, any final words?
Just looking forward to hearing more and seeing you online. So I'll make sure to include all your details.
Thank you both.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.